All right. Well, we got some people still coming on here, and I still have to do a bit of sharing to a couple other pages. But welcome to Coach's Corner. I'm looking forward to tonight's episode, especially given the crew we have here. We have some really, really excellent people. And I'm going to start just with introductions, and then we'll talk about what our episode is tonight. First, we have Viscount Tristan, who is kind of one of the founders of Coach's Corner itself. His Grace Jarl Alanon from Aidenville. His Grace Duke Rongvalder from Midrealm. His Grace Duke Michael from Artemisia. And myself, Duke Bronos from the Midrealm. And we're looking forward that we have the episode tonight is mind games. It's we're not only going to sit and talk a little bit about the stuff we do in a fight, because I know there's a lot to talk about there. But before you get there, you have to develop that ability to understand how that's used and all the pieces that go into being able to essentially control others, provide that mental game in your fight. And I'm just, a real quick note. I remember when I was unbelt early off, I had a Duke come to me and he's like, 90% of the fight is mental. And I'm like, bullshit, old man, and number of years later, bingo, 90% of the fight is mental. Now, the key is, there's a transition. At the beginning, 90% of the fight for many people at the beginning is physical. You have to learn those physical skills before you essentially can allow those to be ingrained and start working into a mental game when you don't have to think about doing something. And that's a super important part. And we're going to talk about that. And we're going to build from what do you even have to do to get in armor, to what do you do at practice, to what do you do in a fight, or maybe even a fight in your practice. And then we're going to talk a little bit about recovery and then some other pieces that a number of our coaches wanted to make sure that we didn't leave out. So I think the first thing where we're going to start is, let's start with essentially what it takes to kind of come into this game, and kind of the basic mental skills. And we have to be a little careful when we talk mental skills. And why I say that is, as much as we have to worry about mental skills, we have the physical skills also take its toll. So we talk physical skills, but there's a lot of thought about how you have to do things and stress around the physical piece. That stress is not only physically, but mentally stress as well. So you have to make sure that you understand that physical and mental skills rely on each other many times, and both are actually need to recover in the end. So, but let's talk about essentially the basic mental skills that you think you need to have coming into the game. You know what? Since you're our guest, Michael, I'm going to throw you under the gun first. How's that sound?
Perfect. So I think you're dead on. I think that there's a certain amount of your mental game that is dictated by the physical skills you have. And it's hard to do a lot of other things until you have a basic repertoire of technique and ability. You've developed a certain amount of physical skills so you feel like you can apply it. But I think there's certain mindsets that also allow you to fight more freely. And this became readily apparent to me early on. I remember a fight. I was fighting an Outlands list down in Estrella early on in my fighting career, and I fought a king of Aidenville, who I wish I remembered his name. And I'm like, oh, he's the king, and it's this terrible thing. And I went in there, and my mind was not right. I mean, I had some athleticism. I had some okay skills. I wasn't developed by any means. But I went in there, concerned and nervous. I'm like, what am I going to do? I was way too much in my head. And it was the most embarrassing fight of my life. And I've watched that fight over and over again to my benefit. Because early on in the fight, he juked something, and I moved so quickly backwards. I landed on my butt. I scooted out, and he's just like, oh, brand new guy. And then to make it worse, he just kind of threw garbage shots at me like it's the new guy. I'll throw some junk at him and let him feel good about himself. And I'm like, well, that doesn't help at all. And it was this terrible thing where nothing was working and I was out of my head, and the fight was probably the worst fight I've ever had in my entire life. And after that fight, I had a shift. I'm like, all right, this is not going to happen. That will never happen again in my life. I don't care how I die. I don't care how I lose. And I don't care what happens in my fights. That will never happen again. And the results started to matter less and less. And that's become something that I started teaching myself, and I started training other people. And over the years, I've come to one basic thing that I teach all new fighters. And I frequently teach advanced fighters as well. And it's something we talked about a little bit. And it's that in this world, there are predators and there are prey. And at any given moment, you are one of those two things. And, when it comes down to it, if you're a sheep don't kill anything. Sheep sometimes survive, and a sheep might get a lucky kick in sometimes and sting somebody. But sheep don't kill lions. Lions prey on sheep, and lions fight each other. And when you're fighting, if you walk into a fight and you're a sheep, that's what I tell all the new fighters. If you walk into a fight and you're a sheep, you're going to get executed. You're just going to get preyed upon and you'll be killed. That's it. You're not going to be in a fight. But when two lions walk into a field and they decide to fight, it's a fight. And one lion might be a bigger, badder, stronger lion, but it's a fight. And no matter what happens in your fights, your fight should be a fight.
I agree. You can't go onto the field with doubt in your head. You have to be there and fully present. Al-Anon, you have some examples, you said?
Yeah, so this is a quick example. You almost have to learn that it's not a fight before you realize that it is a fight. The example that I bring in is, when I first started fighting, I had the fight or flight mentality that would take over anytime anyone swung at me. And it's the same one that I had in I got in a couple of fights when I was a kid, and the same kind of thing would happen. My eyes would start squinting, and, it's like the fight or flight, all the endorphins and everything else that came through, I didn't know how to use them appropriately or how to process them. So I literally my eyes would try to close up, which is not a good place for you to want to be in a fight, whether it's a combat sport fight or a real world fight. God forbid you ever have to be in one again. So I almost had to, once I started doing it, learn that, how to process all the feelings and emotions and everything else that I was experiencing. So, and understand that it wasn't really a real world life or death fight, so that I could learn how to actually fight. And then the funny thing is that years later, when I was bouncing at bars or doing any kind of security or stuff like that, or in situations that were actually confrontationally physical, all the experiences that learning how to fight in the SCA allowed me to have my eyes wide open, my breathing normalized. I was thinking about, okay, where is the next, is anyone going to come from the sides and hit me from the sides? Is this guy got a buddy back here? All the thinkings that you need to do to think effectively in a real world situation that I learned from fighting and SCA fighting. And I think when you're talking about getting some of our mental, capacities ready to learn how to fight, it starts at those kind of things too. You almost have to unlearn some things to start learning how to handle things appropriately. And then they're going to help you throughout whatever you wind up doing, in a combat sports or, real combat situations.
So, and I agree 100%. I think, that idea of, sometimes it's not a terrible thing to go out there and let somebody kind of hit you a little bit, or just someone that you're comfortable and safe with hit you. So you start trusting your armor, and then later you'll just start trusting your shield, and all of those, then your eyes can stay open, and then your mind can stay in the fight. And, all of those things are driving to a space where you get to that place where you're fully aware all the time, as you build on those skills. But you have to build on those skills, right? And it's a step at a time. And, I think you nailed it on that one. Hey, Ronvaldo, you got something to say? Oh, you're on mute. Ronvaldo, are you on mute? I think you're on mute, Ron.
Well, why don't you switch to Tristan real quick?
Yeah,
Because
I'm
I
gonna run
bet,
to
I bet,
Tristan,
I
and
bet
then
he
Ron
has to
Balder, just
experience
talk
it
when
with
you
new
can.
people in the dojo all the time.
Yeah, that's a great way. I mean, I'm sure you get a lot of people that, I mean, they really kind of just walking in a dojo it can be a little scary by itself, right?
It is, especially, one of the biggest things I've noticed is that everybody has a certain level of civility when it comes to their personal bubble. They're used to not being grabbed, touched, have, whether it's a fist or just a hand in their face or something. And I think that the same thing holds true for SCA fighting. I remember doing a demo at a college a number of years ago, and we were armored up, and of course we had young people going by and say, "Oh, this looks really cool." And I said, "Okay, well, here, pick up a sword. I'm gonna get my helmet on. You hit me in the head." And people would just they just do a little light tap, like, "Oh, did I hurt you?" And like, "No, you didn't hurt me. You're gonna actually have to hit me." So there's a certain level of shyness and I guess society norms that we have to get over about making contact with another person. And those are totally natural. I've had, unless somebody's a psychopath or has previous experience that they've already gotten over that, I think there will always be that hesitation to get over. And it is entirely a mind issue of, getting past the idea of, well, I don't want to hurt anybody. And of course, if you never hit anybody with a helmet on, you never know what hurts them or not. So you don't even have a reference point.
Yeah. So Ron Balder, did you get your audio back? No, you're still out. You might want to rejoin maybe. I'm just double checking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to mute you and unmute you just to make sure. Sorry, folks, but I definitely want to hear some of the things Ron Balder has to say. So, as Ron Balder, you keep talking and playing with your machine on this end. We can see you talking. Nothing's muted, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. There was a question, and I'll answer it just because I kind of said it in a comment online. Bess asked, you say you can't have doubts, but does reality fit in? In other words, like you're newly authorized, and you pull a Duke in a tournament. The reality is I'm likely going to lose. And 100%, I think this a little bit goes back to what Michael was talking about. And this is that place where, that mindset, this just falls into the next mindset of, we're going to talk about anxiety later. But this goes into that next mindset of, yes, I'm going to lose, but who else gets to fight in a Duke in a tournament, right? You get an experience. You get a chance to beat a Duke in a tournament. You get, you all kinds of things that are benefits out of that fight. You may never get to fight this guy again. You may give him a good fight, and he's, he'll come back and be like, "Man, that was great." Or you may give him some, you may show him something, and he might come to you and say, "Hey, you might want to fix this." So there's lots of winning scenarios there, and
you might just take a piece out of them too,
right?
I like to refer to that as all glory situations.
How about now? Can we hear me now?
There we go, Ron Balder. You're up.
All right. I did the basic thing, shut everything down and bring it back up again. So
perfect.
I don't know what happened there. So since we're talking about mindset, especially at the beginning, my experience and my philosophy with it are very different, especially from Michael's. While I completely understand his philosophy, I find SCA combat different. I get that. In fact, I really like what Al-Anon said, where once he did SCA, he could see how it translated to real world fighting. And those are different. When I began, and what I had to learn later as someone who was instructing other people, is I think that the first part of the mental game for people coming into our sport is fun. And I had to learn that. I didn't get that consciously until I was teaching and realizing that I was giving input to people and interrupting their fun in the fight. So while I think all these mindset things are important, I think people need to understand these mindsets and these philosophies and these conscious ways of looking at how you think about the fighting don't happen right away. This is after you've been fighting for a while and you've figured out or realized this is where you want to be. I think those first fighters need to just have a good time. That's all I did when I started. Looking back, I just remember having a good time. I don't remember my wins, my losses. I do know that I was beaten a lot. I believe, Bronis, you can attest to how poorly I fought when I first started. Very poorly. Getting one shot, it happened frequently. I didn't know what was going on. But I had a great time. I was hanging out with cool people, doing a cool thing, and this was fun. Later on is when we start talking about intermediate stuff. I think that's what people need to understand is you don't need to come in this and start thinking, this is how I need to train, and I need to be concerned about these things and so on. No, you don't. You need to come in and have a good time with this and find out that this is something you do.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. So I like the idea of the definition behind the predator or prey, because I think, and Michael, I may be putting words in your mouth, so let's understand this is just my interpretation of it. The difference I see there is, are you someone who's going in the fight to win the fight? Or are you just going in there to play and see what happens? Or like some have already mentioned, are you going in there with the attitude, oh, this guy's better than me, so I'm going to lose? Because I've fought that person before and that's not fun. So I think being aware of that difference is important. But I still really don't go out really with a predator mindset.
No.
When I have a good opponent, my goal is, I love that because it's a measure for me. And honestly, the thing that I've been fighting the most for the last several years is me. It's not anybody else. So beating the other person and being the one who wins isn't really my goal. It's, have I done all these things I've been trying to do? I'm the one I'm struggling against. That's what it seems like for me.
So, I think, again, we're kind of jumping in between a lot of things. I think a lot of people come in to the society with different mindsets in general. I think that predator mindset is something that we definitely see at higher levels. And remember, a predator doesn't have to be that idea of, I'm out there tearing something apart. That predator is, I'm walking on the field that I have a plan. I'm gonna win. That's the first thing that comes into mind. It doesn't mean that, the idea, and this is wrong, but I agree. You don't have what would be considered that lion predator mindset where you're stalking something and you're going to rip it apart. You have that mindset of, I am going to build this perfect chess match and I'm going to win at the end because my moves through this whole match and my mind is better than theirs. And that's, but both are coming in with the idea, I'm going to win, right? Yes. I have all the skills and you believe in yourself. And I think that's, definitely a little deeper into subjects when we get there. But I think many people come in, and I think the fun piece is really that entry point for a lot of people. And you have to be careful because if you take the fun away too early, they're going to leave. Yeah. So the fun keeps them there, keeps their head in the game, keeps their mind in the game. And they're still developing early in the piece here. It's all about developing those physical skills in many cases, and also expectation. So I think that becomes a thing. One thing I found on this, on those basic mental skills that coming into like a martial art and stuff is big parts. Choose to maintain a positive attitude. This is actually a huge struggle for, I guarantee you it's a struggle for me every day sometimes, but I think it's a struggle for a lot of people. But it's really something we all should keep, this is not only a basic mindset, but it runs all the way to the end of your career. You have to keep that positive mindset, and we'll talk about that later. Maintain a high level of self-motivation. I mean, you're in a sport, you're trying, you're just trying to enjoy yourself. That might be the fun part. That might be the self-motivation part. Or you're trying to get better at something, or you do have that competitive drive that drives you there. But that's about self-motivation. Set realistic goals. How many times you hear that on the show? You guys are all probably tired of hearing that on the show. And then this is a weird one I found, is deal effectively with people. And I was like, how does that work? And why is that part of the mindset part of a sport? But deal effectively goes everything from how do you work with a trainer? How do you work with your opponents? How do you work with the other people at fight
Yeah.
practice? That's,
How do you listen? How do you communicate? How do you learn? How
It's
do you tell
critical.
someone how do you learn?
yeah. So it's all of those were kind of the basic foundations of what you come into martial art with. Michael, you're going to go back to the predator thing for a second.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So, and I think the idea might not have gotten across the way I intended. It's not the idea of being a predator like I must destroy everything. But there's a line between being a predator who's trying to win a fight and someone who's being preyed upon. And too many people come into their first fights going, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm nervous. I'm afraid. They're not having fun because they're feeling like they're preyed on. They fall into that prey category. And you can fight your fight a lot of different ways. There's lots of different predatory approaches. I don't want it to be thought that the only way to do that is ferociously or animalistically. You can have very calculating predatory fights. You can have very civil predatory fights. You can have absolutely fun predatory fights. But it has more to do with I'm in the fight to fight and I can let go of the result. Whether I win or lose, I was in a fight because I chose to fight rather than I went out trying not to lose because I was prey in this situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. In fact, I'll give you one example. I had a Duke right before, in fact, shortly before I got knighted in 1 crown, who told me, he's like, you will never get knighted and you will probably never win a crown because you're having too much fun. And in a way, he was right. There's that place, and I was a little pissy at the time, but there was that place where I was literally having so much fun that I wasn't being very predator-like. In other words, I didn't care enough. You have to care a little bit about winning, and I was caring more about the fun than the winning. And then when the other side of that, if you care too much about the winning, then sometimes it gets really ugly. And this goes back to that fine line where you can have fun and you can win. You still care about winning. And that's a really hard line. Sometimes we fall on either side of that line, even throughout our whole career. So just, that I think that's, my example of exactly what you're talking about, Michael. All right, let's move on to the next part because I know there's going to be lots more stuff. And that is preparatory mental skills. In other words, those mental skills that we have to learn at practice. How do we get to that point where we know how to manipulate a fight? Or how do we get to that point where I can throw a blow better because I understand it better? Or I can block better because I understand that better. There's a lot that goes in the actual practice to develop mind and body. Who wants to start this one? Don't all raise your hand at once.
I'll give this one a shot.
All right.
It was interesting, and funny that you describe it, Bronis. I had almost the same entry curve. I got in the SCA because I just love the idea of it. I love the idea of getting in armor and fighting and swords and shields and hitting people, and I was just all about it. I'd enjoy practice. And I got to the point after a few years where I practiced really well. I performed well at a practice, but then when the tournament came, I didn't have the mental skills for that. I felt I underperformed in tournament than practice sparring, and I think it was for the same reason. I was having a lot of fun. One thing about preparing, having watched many fighters and how they approach practice, where their mind isn't on what they're going to do at practice until the moment they step out on the field, and then they kind of go, well, I'm in armor, I suppose we'll spar and I'll just go. Whereas what I got so excited about it, I would spend several days being like, okay, when I get to practice, what do I want to work on? What would I really get geeked out about trying? Or what did I see last week somebody else do well that I'd like to try to do? So I'd start getting in a mindset of making some use out of practice. And I was still having fun. Fun for me was finding something that worked. And so I was enjoying that cycle part. And then practice would go by. And after the practice, for the next day or two, I'd be like, what did I try that worked really well? Or what did I try that I really screwed up and I need to work on next week? And that kind of became my list. So from a mental standpoint, I was using the entire week between practices to ride sort of visualization curve and a planning curve. So by the time I practice was a day or two away, I was almost quivering with excitement. Like, I get to practice now. And so that created to me a healthy eagerness for getting to practice and making something of it. Whereas I've seen other people literally drag their armor out of their car trunk into practice like it was a labor, and I could tell there was really no emotional investment in what they were about to do. And what I saw over years was those people that practice would have they'd drag themselves out of practice, usually thinking, well, I just got my butt kicked for an hour and a half and I don't know what I was doing or what I learned. And over time, you see that those people can get better, but only because of just raw persistence. Like, they just don't know that they're suffering enough to quit, and they just keep coming anyway. But their time is not very well spent. And I think that a similar type of curve happens when you look at going to tournament and performing under a pressure where it matters. Like, you make a mistake, you're going to be behind the 8 ball, or you're going to be out of the tournament. And so, but if you use those cycles between the performance times to say, I've got a plan, here's my plan, I'm going to train to execute what I want to do, then I go, like what Sean would say, the tournament is your performance measure. You get to see all the training that you did up to that point. Okay, what did well, what didn't do well. Now you make a log of it. Now you go back to training, you fill those deficiencies, and then you go try it again. So if that makes sense, like, there's a method to week to week or tournament to tournament. And that creates, in my opinion, a positive mindset versus I'm going to get bruised on my butt again because I can't, block it or whatever.
Yeah.
Tristan, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So I really like that description, but you bring something that's unique to this group, and that is you are actually a professional martial arts instructor now. Mm-hmm. So what you've talked about is finding this sense of purpose and direction with combat for yourself as you learn. Now that you're an instructor, especially a professional one, is there a way you help your students to find the answers to that, to recognize the situation and find answers to that?
That's an interesting question. And I enjoyed mentoring SCA fighters for many years, and that's kind of what naturally led me into martial art instruction, because I enjoyed showing people a path to realizing what their body could do and what their mind could do that they had no concept of. Because when I learned SCA fighting, almost all of it was self-taught just by trial and error. And I think, fighters of generations prior to like the last 2 SCA generations almost entirely relate to that method of learning. There was little or no structured learning. But it is very exciting to find somebody who can give you that nugget of knowledge or wisdom that will help you get to that very next rung on the ladder, or maybe just you can grab the next rung where you couldn't grab it just a moment before. And Bronis is one of those people for me that years and years and years ago was kind enough and wise enough to be able to do that with me. And then I watched him do it with person after person after person. I said, that's what I want to be, a coach like that. And that is what opened the door to, once I started practicing that, and just like fighting, I was clumsy at it at first. I felt I sucked. I'd do the classic thing. I'd flood students with too much information and their eyes would start spinning around. You'd almost be too generous in everything you want to give them. But like with everything, practice, you get better at it. You get more efficient. You realize I'm doing too much. You get more from less generally. And the same thing holds true for training people, in hand-to-hand martial arts, is to get them an enjoyable experience. And from my point of view, when they walk out of a class feeling empowered, like they could do something they never thought they could ever do, they'll go, I can't wait to come back to this. Like, this is, when is the next class? Like, to me, that's how the formula tends to go.
That's exciting.
So we got a question. The question was, for new people who feel preyed upon, how do you suggest to modify your thoughts? Michael, I'm going to throw that back at you since That's kind of based on what you brought up.
So I think this one's actually remarkably easy. It's so simple that people often don't do it when I first say, just do this thing. Because in a fight, there's so many variables. Like if somebody's trying to hit you, you can change your distance, you can change your timing, your angles, you can change the height that you stand at, how deeply you bend your knees, you can change your weapons and shield positions, and any one of those things might accidentally fix the problem. But I tell people this is the simple solution. If you ever feel like you're being preyed on, do anything else and just experiment with it. Just freely, open-mindedly, liberatingly, just play with it. Say, if I feel like I'm being preyed on, maybe I step out of range. I don't stay and wait and see what happens and hope I block it. I just get out of range. Or maybe I walk right in and I throw a shot. Maybe I take a step to the right and see what that does. Maybe take a step to the left, see what that does. I change anything. I move my shield somewhere. Just change something because you're just figuring out, it's the if-then sequence of events. If I do this, what happened? If I do that, what happened? And if it works, great. You start to figure out pieces and you go along, and that lets you have the liberty to fight freely and say, hey, something happened. But anytime you feel preyed on, it's just a loose situation. It just feels terrible. It ends terrible. You don't win.
Put you in a negative.
Yeah.
Right?
So just give yourself some liberty to say, I'm just going to change any one thing, maybe 2 or 3 things. I'm going to just go somewhere, shoot something, move my shield, just change something and play with it and give yourself the liberty to just see what happens.
Totally agree. Ron Balder, you got a little bit on this one?
Just a quick note, Michael. I thought that was a great explanation. That's in fact, I made a note for myself for people.
Yeah, it was.
We have a couple of people who are having a good time, but feel very much like prey to me, and it would be nice to give them something. And that is I like it that it's not only simple, but it's also empowering. You're not saying here's a solution to your problem. You're saying pick a solution. You can't be wrong because the only wrong one is the one you're doing right now, right? And I thought that was brilliant. It reminds me and ties to something Bronis had said earlier about resting. We've talked about how, this is mental, but physical is important too. And we all know you fight long enough and whatever your mind's doing, your body can get tired and behind you, but it works the other way around. I have taught people, and I've heard this from a few different people, they've wanted to stop the passes, not because they were physically tired, but mentally. In their words, their brains were full, right? Their brain needed time to process the information. And I give them a lot of credit for that. I try to watch for it as an instructor, which reminds me of what you said, Tristan. There are a lot of things I do now that I did not do when I started teaching people, and that overwhelming people was one of them. And watching for that response, I realized nothing else is going in. Time for me to shut up, right? So I give them a lot of credit for recognizing when their brain is full, and I think that's something people need to be aware of. You're not going to feel it like a physical, like being physically tired. You're going to feel it like frustration is one way it shows up commonly.
Yeah, mentally you lose the fight. I mean, you're not in the fight anymore. Sometimes it's
you feel like you're trying, you try harder and you get nowhere. Like you're running really fast against a wall and going nowhere. And what's happening is your brain is maxed out. It needs time to sift through what you've given it. So take some time, just like you do physically. Go drink some water, sit down, think about what's going on, and what you will find is it will become clearer to you. Who you are and how you process it will make it different. Some things will process quickly. Some things end up being a little like Tristan was talking about, where he realized in a particular practice there was a thing, whether it was something he learned or something that was a weakness, and he took the next few days to process that, to think, this was a thing, what's causing this thing? Oh my God, this is it. I want to go to practice so I can do the thing. So be aware of that. All these things are great, but you're going to tire out mentally, and it's not going to feel like it does physically.
Yeah, totally agree. Al-Anon, you had a couple of things.
Yeah, it's kind of a 2-point, the 2 points I want to bring out. One's to trainers, and then one's to fighters. It's really important that to be able to have these good motivations and to start building confidence and to have a good positive attitude about things that are going is that you find success. Success means things differently to everybody, but success is important because, well, I mean, obviously you build on your successes and that's how you're going to eventually, develop all your prowess. But as much or more than anything, we've talked about the balance of fun and work and fun, too much fun, but the fun part is so integral to all of this that because when it's not fun, I know some people's like, well, it's not fun because I'm working really hard, and I get that. But for most people, the fun is why they put all the time, money, everything that they invest into the activity and into this, into doing everything within the SCA, from fighting to the service. So the fun part is important, and as trainers, we need to help fighters find success, and because success is fun every time. When you hit something, when you hit a goal, or when you hit a guy for the first time that you've not hit before, or really if you do anything and it's a success, you love that feeling. Is incredible, and it's those feelings that keep people coming back week after week after week. So understanding that that's a true thing, as a trainer, you want to find ways to give your fighters opportunities to succeed. That the whole school of hard knocks thing is by and large BS. I realize there's always a guy that came out of it really, it's like, it was all tough love. All I ever got was tough love. And the tough love, I eventually got good. And it's like, yeah, maybe, but somewhere in there, you started having some success and it felt great. And it drove you to work harder so that you could feel it again and feel it again and feel it again. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty addicted to success. I love the way it feels. I love, and even if I'm successful, or even if I feel like I was successful and lost the fight, I was successfully managed to do all the things I wanted to do. I just didn't beat the guy, and I can still feel really good about that. So, it's always, we talk a lot about changing the victory conditions, and I think that's important, but I also think it's really important, and we may sometimes have to artificially create opportunities for success. It just needs to be genuine. You can't just let someone hit you. Eventually they're going to realize that was kind of a fake success. So you find real ways. And one of the times I've told people I did this before, it's like, I will fight you extremely vigorously, but I'll pull my offense so far back down that, it's not just a lay on, I got you, lay on, I got you, lay on, I got you. It's lay on, and then we work on stuff. And then when you hit me, you absolutely hit me. You did everything correct to have hit me. Yeah, I could have probably prevented you from hitting me by hitting you earlier, but that's still a real success for people. And so whether it's those kinds of things or other things, we've got to always have success to build upon and to keep the motivation for fun going. And as a fighter, you have a personal obligation to try to know what makes you feel good and start working for those things and understanding what a success is.
Wrongvalder, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna mention the victory conditions because it ties exactly, and then Al-Anon defined that really well. So I'm not going to expound on something that he already clarified. I used the word fun earlier, and I realized the problem with the word fun is it needs to be defined. It's too nebulous. So I think it's important that I think we understood what I was talking about earlier when we start this, and all we want to do is have a good time, and the fun at that point is the excitement, and like Tristan said, we get to put on armor and hit people with sticks and play it being.
Yeah, it's fun
medieval.
Just to do it.
It is. It's totally it's just exciting and fun. And we've had fighters who just loved it. They didn't even care who got hit. They got hit and they were like, "That was awesome." Every bit of it is just exciting fun. I think it needs to stay fun, but the definition of what that fun is changes.
It does.
And one of them is, like Bronis is frequent of saying, as a way to motivate people, winning is fun too. So it's perfectly cool to do that. And yeah, you guys are right. Sometimes it's hard. And you know what? There's a certain point, I'll tell you, it doesn't get easier. Sometimes it just gets harder.
It gets harder.
Yeah, Bronis and I have talked about this frequently, how hard we are working on stuff all the time. You know, I've had conversations with newer fighters and they're like, oh, I can't wait till I can just, you know, it'll be easy and I can do things like you do. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'd be lying to you if I told you that there was going to be a point you reached where you're like, oh, I finally made it. It's finally easy. You know what? I'm sorry. It's not going to happen.
Still
But
waiting
the fun
for that
changed
day.
it.
Yeah, unfortunately, in all sports, that is a common thing. The older you get, the harder you train.
Yeah. So, but understand that your fun is going to change. There's still moments where we're excited by fights, but there are other things that excite us. Like Tristan pointed out, which I thought was really poignant, is the thrill he gets now after literally decades of being in martial arts when he helps a student and a student gets a thing. That is a big deal. And the victory conditions change. Like Al-Anon said, that we are constantly doing ourselves. I've been losing a lot of fights the last few months because I'm making a major change to where I put my feet, and my balance on my feet, and I'm losing a lot more fights. But I'm learning to find satisfaction in that. If I can keep going here, I'm going to talk about something a little different. This is I'm going to call it a gift that Bronis gave me. A few years back, I had to make some big changes in the way I was fighting. And it was extremely frustrating for me. I would go to practice and I would do what I did. I figured out what I needed to work on. I figured out how it needed to be done. And I would do the thing in the fight. And after a bit, it would work. But something else that I had already learned would fail. And it became very frustrating, like I can't do everything. And this went circular, and practice got more and more frustrating for her. I kept going, but it was not fun. It was infuriating. And Rana said something to me, and I knew he was right because it made me angry when I first heard it. And that was, I had to, the way he did it was he said, tell me 3 things that you did well today. And I didn't want to because it made me angry. It's like, why should I focus on what I'm doing positive? Because I'm already doing it. The negative stuff is what I need to focus on because that's what I need to fix. Except that's not how it works. If you want to get success in this, if you want your mind to be in the right place, you have to be what I have tried to do consciously with myself since I learned this decades ago, and then reminded again with what Ron told me, is you have to be completely honest with yourself. And that honesty is not just being clearly aware of what you are not doing well. It is being clearly aware of what you are doing well, because you've already built skills. And if you're going to do like I did and only focus on the things you think that need to be fixed and you ignore the foundation and everything you've already built, you will never build the upper part. It's like trying to build a ladder and only focusing on building the high part of the ladder and ignoring the bottom part. It's impossible. You cannot get any higher unless you are consciously aware of what those skills are that you've learned. So when it comes to being motivated and such, change your victory conditions, do these things that people talk about, but do not let go of what you've achieved already. You have, whoever you are, if you've been doing this for any period of time, you have a foundation to build on. So be honest with yourself. Yeah, look at your faults honestly and find their solutions, but don't let go of what you've already done right. Be honest with yourself in a positive way too.
I think that's
all right.
dead on.
So, Michael, I think you had a really quick, hopefully a quick note. I'd like to get a couple words in, and then we're going to move on to the next subject.
Yeah, I think you're dead on with that. I think it's a lot of people don't realize that fights are complicated things. It's not, sometimes I do everything right and the other guy did everything right and stopped everything I did. And my technique was good, my approach was good, and they just dealt with it. That doesn't mean it wasn't good. And I think that recognition of your side of the equation and how that interacts gives you an ability to say, all right, even if I do it right, it sometimes doesn't work. And sometimes if I do it wrong, it still works. And being able to just kind of look at that from a perspective that allows you the ability to just absorb the fight and recognize what's true and good and what just happened because it just didn't work out. And that's fine.
All right, so last little bit, and there's lots of great stuff here, and I think we covered the points that the couple of points that was brought in this topic when I found it, and one is use positive self-talk. Rongolder just gave a great speech about that one, and why it's so important. We have an 800 number you can donate to later. And but no, it's really the truth. You positive self-thought is critical. If you think negative, it will drag you down that hole that you're looking in. Positive self-talk. And then the other piece was use positive mental imagery. In other words, and that goes in many ways. See yourself winning. See yourself throwing that perfect shot. See yourself doing all of these things. There's tons of studies that will tell you how that works. It's amazing. You know, there's the free throw study that they did where kids were just out. They were not allowed to shoot free throws, and they were just able to do whatever they want. And another group that sat on the floor in the gym and just thought about perfect free throws, and the difference was amazing. So you know, positive imagery is a huge thing. So that's the 2 points that came from when I was looking this up, and I think we covered a lot of that. I want to point one other thing out. Many times people come in for fun is many different things, and I think we talk about that, but fun is different for every person. And a good coach finds out what fun that is for each person. I have people that show up to fight practice just to do ladder drills, and because they've never done sports before. They need to learn. They're having fun because they're feeling like they're learning to do something they've never had the chance before, and we're giving them the skills to build on. And every time they walk up, and here's the proverbial ladder, every time they go up one step, that's more than where they were before. And that's where their satisfaction, and that's where the fun is for them. And building those skills become, everything from how to move, how to, throw a shot, how to block a shot, how to essentially build a fight, how to throw a fake. All of these things are skills that we're teaching people. And you have to find what they want. Some people are like, you know what, fun for me right now is just going out and free forming it. And that's good. Some point when they come back and that person who's not free forming it or is starting to win, and they're like, well, this is not as much fun anymore, they'll ask. And then they're willing to receive, and then you help them. But, just beware that you ask people. It's simple. And for those that are out there, tell people what is fun for you, because I think that's hugely important in not only in what we do, but in the dojo. In a dojo, people go in, they're not learning necessarily. Most of them are going in. A lot of them don't have any experience. A lot of kids that don't have any experience, you're helping them. A lot of them are, just want to learn some defense because they feel like they have nothing. So now you're helping them with that, making them mentally feel stronger about themselves. So that same thing exists in what we do. And a good teacher and a good trainer and a good coach finds those things for each student. All right, we're going to jump into the actual performance skills. And these are what do we need in a fight? And I'm going to throw these out first so that we can talk about them, and then we'll see if we cover these. Managing anxiety, that's a performance skill. Managing emotions, performance skill. Maintaining concentration, performance skill. So who would like to jump in first on these? Uh-oh. Nobody. Well, all right. Well, Michael's it.
All right. So I think some of these things are kind of self-solving, and it may sound terrible, but they really are self-solving. But like there's anxiety people have in fights, but the anxiety is tied to a future result or a fear of what might happen. And you have the whole concept of being present or being mindful, because pain and loss and anxiety all exist in the future. All those things are tied to the future. The will I win? Will I succeed? Will this guy hit me? Will I be embarrassed? All those are anxieties. Anxieties based in the future. If you're just in the moment fighting, just being present fighting, those things aren't present. Does that make sense? And if you can let yourself just fight freely and say, you know what, if there's a result and it's going to be what it is. I'll either win or I'll lose. I will die or I won't. I will heroically win or I won't. And I don't have to be tied to the result. I will just fight, and I can just do so freely. And if you do that, anxiety doesn't exist. You can just be in the moment and fight, but you have to be present. It's all about just being present.
Who would like to jump in there? All right, Ron.
I think first of all, I think Michael's exactly right. The anxiety, every time I hear somebody go, oh, I'm anxious about fighting, I find that it comes from fear of the unknown, fear of what's going to happen in the future. I think he's dead on with that. Letting go of it is, I think, a good method for some people. I have had some dependents and people I've taught who, when dealing with the anxiety or the emotions, it has helped them to have someone with whom they can go to and talk about those things instead of trying to control them or suppress them. Give them a place so they understand that those emotions and that anxiety is okay first. We have someone in our group that I was not able to do that with, that Bronis is able to do that because he has a good connection with them. So I found that to be a good first step. The anxiety for me, because I'm sure this comes from just how I dealt with it, I've always had that, and I still get it, and I recognize it as fear of what's coming in the future. And my way of dealing with that is to use the skills that I've taught myself in a fight to have control of that fight. I'm afraid of looking bad and losing because I don't know what my opponent's going to do. So I make my opponent show me what he's going to do as much and as soon as possible. And that's how I relieve anxiety. So that's my method for it. But it's different, right. And I think they're both vital.
Yeah, I totally with you, and I agree. Anxiety comes out in many different ways, just like fun comes out in many different ways, and it is definitely something that has to be carefully managed. And we'll talk about anxiety a little bit more later as well. Tristan.
Yeah, I remember running into anxiety early on, and I just wanted to put a kind of a tangible thought on the be present sentiment, because a lot of that can be hard to relate to when you have anxiety and you think, what does be present mean, or in the moment, or whatever. And I remember when I'd go to a tournament or something, and a bout would be announced that my opponent would now become known to me, and oh boy, that he's tough, or this can be tricky. That's the instant the anxiety sets in. And what Ron Welder talked about, it's the unknown. You aren't sure what you're going to do. You aren't sure. You don't know if you're going to be presented, an opportunity. You don't know if you're going to be just overwhelmed by somebody who's better than you. What I found was and that maybe this is just my pragmatic way of looking at it, there's a finite time between that moment that you know who your opponent is and the fight starts. Let's say it's 2 minutes or a minute and a half. You've got 90 seconds to figure out what you're going to do. Every moment you spend thinking about how anxious you are is a moment you're not figuring out, okay, what am I dealing with? What is my plan? How am I going to do this? What am I going to be looking for? You're wasting time. So you almost guarantee that by the time, if you spend that 90 seconds being anxious, worrying, you walk into that fight with no plan, no idea what you're going to try to do. You're probably not even looking at what your opponent's showing you, which is, how is he moving? What is his armor like? Does he have marks on his helmet where he often gets hit? that might tell you, okay, this might be a place where I could try to hit him. To me, I just took a very practical way. And I think that you could describe that as being in the moment. I'm in the moment of what I'm about to do. I'm using that precious time to form a plan. May not be the perfect plan, but it's certainly better than no plan. And I found that kind of a universal thing. Just focus on what the next thing you need to do is, and put the self-doubt talk out of your head, the negative stuff, the worrying, all of that stuff. Just say, all right, I'll worry about this later. Now I need to focus on the job at hand.
Sorry, I'm playing with some banners here, folks. This one is kind of interesting. It's from the book Relentless. But, you know, I think when we talk about anxiety, and anxiety is a huge part of the sport, people look at anxiety and stress in a negative belief. In other words, we're taught all our lives, stress is bad. You know what makes you great? Stress. Yeah. Pushing yourself farther than you would normally. And that's how we push ourselves to that next level constantly. Anxiety, if you got that anxiety, use it. And the idea of using that anxiety is, you know, be in a place where you're like, okay, it's a big fight. What am I going to do to win this? Right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to go out there and execute exactly. I'm like Ron Gully says, I'm going to create this fight right from the beginning, so I don't have to worry about being beat, because I'm going to know what they're going to do. Without that anxiety, you just walk out in the field and they're like, hey, I'm here. Here, let's go. Right? Use the anxiety. Stop looking at stress and anxiety in the negative. Look at it in the positive. You know why you have stress? Because people expect stuff from you because they've seen it already. Okay? So guess what? That's a positive. Now you're just working more forward. And that's how we really, you know, when you look at both of those things, we have to use them in the positive. So
yeah, let me jump in on that. I think you're absolutely right. Everyone so far talking about anxiety and emotions. I think it would be the rare competitive fighter that doesn't feel anxiety, because they put pressure on themselves. We put pressure on themselves. I certainly feel anxiety going into opportunities to show that I'm trying to be true to my training. And, you know, so when I go into a tournament, I have anxiety. It's how you manage it and how you deal with it and what you can do with it. Just as Bronos was saying, you know, what I try to do is I try to ritualize certain things at the beginning of a fight, before the lay-on and after the lay-on. And it's the first part of, you know, when I start doing my probes and I start trying to remind myself about what are the important steps of fighting, that allows me to take the anxiety that I'm feeling, put that energy back into things that I know are, you know, help drive success for me. And then it allows me to relax my brain and you know, utilize it correctly. I've mentioned on this in one of the other pods or streams that we did, you know, someone was like, it must be nice to get to the finals of Crown and not have any butterflies. And it's like, oh, I absolutely have butterflies. And I have every time I've managed to make it to the finals. It's six times. And I had butterflies. It's what I did with them. My opponent stressed over it incorrectly, and I could see that it was messing with them. And I used it it's like, store that energy, let it, you know, you turn it into a little ball that you can call on when you need it. Like, I want to put a little extra zip on a shot. Well, I'm going to let some of that anxiety and those butterflies out. You know, you have to, you know, and it is an advanced technique, but it's something that I would love for all fighters to start working to. Appreciate and understand that almost everyone, and if you're competitive, everyone has anxiety. It's now what you're going to do with it. And the butterflies and the emotions of a fight are absolutely there. And when we talk this is a whole thing about mind games. Well, what are you going to do with it? You know, are you going to, if I see someone struggling a little bit, the humane thing might be to try to relieve that pressure for them. But the competitive jerk in me is like, I'm going to start pushing their buttons and mess with their brain even further so that I can get this win. And then maybe later I'll get a chance to talk to them about how to work through those things. But right now I'm going to try to win this tournament. And, so I'll go through and I'll push those buttons. And I know we're going to eventually get to some of those, the actual, what are the mind games of this episode, mind games. I want to leave you with one more thing before you jump into whatever you're going to talk about next. I often refer back to the great Bill Russell, a 13-year career of which he was an 11-time champion. And he threw up before every game he ever played. Every single one, because it meant something to him. It was important. This was his life and his job and his legacy and is everything he ever cared about. And so it was there. And, he'd go throw up and then try to focus on winning the game, but he had to get that out of his system. Whatever you do, there's lots of different ways. I'm not recommending that everyone throw up, but understand that this energy is here. Don't let it be destructive. Find a way to use it.
Yep. Michael, you had your finger up there.
Yeah, just one small thing to add to that. I'm going to make a comparison. So a lot of times you get new fighters and they're out there and they're holding their shield and they're holding it awkwardly because it's not normal. The muscles are straining. They're trying to keep their guard up. They're trying to hold their shield up. And someone disengages and they're still just holding that shield up and their muscles are dying and they feel like the shield's so heavy. And I frequently will just tell them, hey, you guys just disengaged. He's way too far away to hit you. Put your shield down. Relax your shield. And I think our emotions and our mindset should be very similar. Like, I think it's totally fine to say, I'm anxious, I'm nervous, I'm whatever, fight's coming up, and let that be what it is, use it for what it is, and say, none of this matters. I can relax myself mentally and just let that stuff be until the fight starts, at which point I will assume the mindset I need to fight this fight. And that's when you engage your mindset. So I think part of it is recognizing when you need to be concentrating, when you need to be focusing and dictating your mindset, and when you can just relax and conserve some mental energy and some mental effort by not having to worry about it. If we're disengaged, I can disengage a little bit mentally. If we're not actively fighting, we're between the second fight of the best of three or whatever, there's a full moment for me to disengage mentally and relax stuff, let myself calmly and collectively come up with my game plans, whatever I want to do in a relaxed way, and then have to sharpen my focus to fight the fight. But it's a matter of...
All I can think of, Michael, as you're saying that is having Branos tell everyone and showing people how when people start trying to do that, you don't let them. You don't give them a second to relax. You don't give them a second to compose themselves. One of the ways that he creates pressure is by staying just enough in range that you can't have that. I just need a moment to compose myself here. It's like, well, you're not getting it in this fight.
Oh, absolutely.
You can have it between rounds.
The moments between rounds, the moments in that 2 minutes before the fight starts, I can be totally just let my emotions happen until lay on is called. When I salute my opponent, something changes.
That's right. Those emotions go away.
And it just straight into void for me. It's now right. Void, and now we fight.
And we'll talk about that emotion.
Over, it's back off. I don't have to.
And I think we have some comments around emotion in a bit here. Let's jump because we're right on the kind of top of the 9 o'clock hour, or at least 5 minutes after. So, as usual, these mind episodes are always so much to talk about, and we have great coaches here. But one of our new coaches, Sir Louis, brought a couple of things that we do here inside the game. And I'm just going to kind of I'm just going to bring what he brought up. And because this is the mind games that are played. And this is actually what Michael was just talking about a little bit. And that is, inside that fight, finding the time. Al-Anon was talking about how I use constant pressure to never allow you to relax, never allow you to reset, never allow you to essentially get out of thought, because I want to keep you in thought. Not only do I want to keep you in thought, I want to keep adding. I'm going to touch your arm. I'm going to touch you. I'm going to move in a way that surprises you. I'm going to let off and then come back on real fast. And I'm just going to keep layering questions in your head until you're full and until your mind is so stressed out, you get to that place where Rongvalder talks about you just can't process everything, and you fundamentally fail, and you stop, and you miss something, or you almost pretty much give up. So that is one way. One way is to overload some people. Louis passed a bunch of stuff that we use, and I'm just going to bring them up, and then I'm sure everybody else. Let's just talk about some of the things you use in a fight to essentially break your opponent down. We've been playing around with a lot of managing connection and then throwing connection away. And what do we mean by that is we all, the best people in fighting, make a connection with the other person that not only a physical, but mental connection to them. Being able to read somebody earlier than they do something is really a big part. And I think it's actually much bigger part than the physical role. We just don't talk about it much. And so what you do is you make that connection. And I asked Tristan to do this with some class students, and I think they were surprised. And you make this connection, and I do it just by walking back and forth, asking to keep in that perfect range. And we can do this. I'm in the connection, I'm tight connection, and then I'll do this, and I'll walk forward, and they're like, "Hey, what happened?" And the next thing you know, you're bumping into them, because what happens is they lost something. They're trying to figure out what they lost. Meanwhile, they lost the ability to watch what you're actually doing because they're thinking. And that connection was thrown away. That can be done in shots. That can be done through all of those things. I'm not going to talk about each one. This is a complex one. Make people feel uncomfortable with timing. So changing up timing, making them anticipate timing and then changing it up. Control your opponent's breath and break them down mentally. We just talked about that with constantly staying in range. That's that Eastern European idea that I'm going to constantly move and stay in the edge of your range where you can't get good breath and relax. In other words, keep tension in your body. Overloading your opponent with information. We just talked about that. Controlling the emotion of your opponent in the fight. Emotion is a killer. If you're dealing with emotion, you're not dealing with thinking through your fight correctly. So I tell people, and it's hard. I hate saying it sometimes, but I'm like, emotion. You have to have you have to remove emotion from your fighting. And that
fear is the mind killer, I hear.
Yeah, exactly. There we are.
And if you just change fear to emotion, then it's absolutely apt to what we're doing.
Yes. So using small blocks, strong defense to break down your opponent's confidence. In other words, set up defensively so that you block. You're able to block everything your opponent throws, and soon, especially if you make it look super easy, they'll throw those shots away. They won't do them again because they just think they can't do it anymore. So you can make people throw away some of their best shots sometimes. Making someone fight up the prowess ladder in let's see here, how's this? Making someone fight up the prowess ladder in a new group to make sure they are tired and defeated before they get to the top. Now this is a good one. This came out of Dallas for him. In other words, if you really want to break somebody down, make them fight other people. I see this all the time. I don't go get if somebody's like, I'm not going to go fight that guy Fresh because Fresh, he might beat me. 10 fights in, I got a chance. And then once I beat him once or twice, they get used to it. And then you don't need as many fights. So, in other words, find the times when your opponent's weak and take advantage of it. So sounds terrible, but that's part of the fight game too, because going into those fights, you win crown before you get to crown. I tell people that all the time. All right. So there's some of the stuff we do around here a little bit. I thought Louis did a great job coming up with some of those. There's a million other things. Rongvalder does stuff that's amazing. In fact, I'm going to show a little clip in a minute here. But Alan, what kind of stuff do you do that you rely on right now?
So a lot of what I think I'm doing that would fall into the category of mind games is almost performance art. I'm showing things that I want my opponents to be thinking about. And then I want that to be, while that's so thoroughly in their heads, then I can do the opposite. Even more so, I can show them what they think I'm about to do again, and then move into other things. And, that's a lot of the fake, feint, setups. A good example of that are like pool tournaments, and some of the successes that I've had with this. would, a good example would be something like a candle miss in those early couple of rounds. You might be fighting 9 guys in the first round. But I'll try to fight them all in a row as soon as I get in, because I am showing my next opponent something that I want the guy that I'm fighting now, I am trying to beat them, but I'm also very cognizant of what I did so that I can try to use it against the next guy, and then use that and those same 2 things against the third guy. And then, I try to go as far as I can. I mean, sometimes I can go the whole round. I can win out the round entirely, and have built upon each of it. But I'm very conscious that I'm showing people things, but I'm not giving the game away. I'm showing them what I want them to be thinking about. You can do that in a more single fight context. One of the first things I always do, people, it's like, first of all, if anyone anymore at this point isn't ready for a thrusting tip, I don't know what game you're playing, because almost everybody has them. And even if they don't, they're so proliferated out there that your brain should be, everyone's got a thrusting tip. And you know what? I will still, I use high contrasting tape, and I point it out every single time at the beginning of the fight. I have a thrusting tip. And I do that because I want you to start thinking about my thrusting tip. It's not a courtesy. It is the exact opposite of a courtesy. It's discourteous. It's damn right disrespectful. I'm like, oh, I have a thrusting tip. I'll hold it out right in their eyeballs right as the fight's getting ready to start going. Just wanted to, I have a thrusting tip. Sounds like I'm being courteous, but now they're thinking thrusting tip. And so I start using the thrusting tip to set range. I start using the thrusting tip to open set up shots that I want to do. I'm almost never going to thrust with it, but I want my opponent thinking I'm going to thrust with it. And so those are some of the things that you can do. And straight up just exude confidence. It's important to be confident, but it's also, I think, important to exude confidence. Stand like you know what you're doing. Move around like you know what you're doing. Eventually, you'll actually know what you're doing. But, these things are important. And when I look across at my opponent and I see a lack of confidence in something that they're doing, I start trying to work it. How can I work that into this, this fight? What are they telling me that they don't want me to know? Okay, so you start using it. You can get very specific with these examples, but it's absolutely useful. And the same thing I was talking about with pool tournaments, best 2 of 3 to advanced tournaments. I absolutely am using the first fight to try to win the second fight. And if need be, if that goes to the third fight, then the third fight. They're all setups. If I hit you light in the leg, you can almost guarantee that the next, I'm going to throw a fake to the leg, because your brain is thinking, well, he almost got me. It's like, okay, well, now it was as good as I hit your leg often. If a tap to the arm is oftentimes better than hitting the arm. Tap that arm, and then they freeze for a second as they're processing, and then you're hitting something else. I mean, if I think meets the definition of a mind game. I didn't have to put a ton of energy, and I didn't have to open myself up to do a super fast just tap on the sword arm. And now I'm actually throwing real legitimate shots for the head.
So we call the jab and straight punch. There we are. So Tristan, you kind of covered one part, and I'm going to bring this up because Ellen uncovered presentation. You looked at that at presentation in a different way. And you talked about kind of, how you went into the fight, what you were looking for.
Yeah, we talked a little about this pre-show, but I'd make sure my helmet was clean of tape marks between every fight, and whenever I'd go to every practice. I've seen other fighters that will retape their swords before every tournament because part of it was a mental confidence thing, which I think plays right into mindset. When your gear is tight, you're ready, you're presenting, making a good presentation. One of the things that I will often coach unbelts for when they're like, I'm getting pretty good, but I feel like I've hit kind of a plateau, and I'm not sure exactly why. I'll usually tell them, take a look at what you are showing everybody. Maybe your armor's a little tattered, maybe it's a little beat up. maybe it's time to look at cleaning up your appearance. Just try that. And for the most part, presenting something new and better, it doesn't necessarily make their technical fighting any better, but the confidence it gets them can often take them over that plateau and start them on the upward move again. Another thing that will affect his opponents, or that person's opponents, is they'll look at him in a new way. They'll be like, this is a new fighter. He's got a new helmet. He's got a new tabard. His shield's painted now where it wasn't before, or, you know, what have you. When people look at you in a different way, they will respond to you in a different way. That is creating essentially a mindset change. And it's whether it's an individual or it's a group of people, like a fighting group. If you have a kind of mishmash group, and then suddenly you show up and you've all got matching tabards, you all got matching gear, it will create an impression, and that will change the mental interaction between two people.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
So Michael, you had something.
Yeah. So on the subject of mind games and the controlling of these things, I find that managing people's perceptions is extremely useful. I had a guy who was fighting, and he was reviewing film. He's like, I don't know how you beat me. I just don't know. And he watched the film, and he after the fact made the comment. He said, I was never in range, and I thought I was the entire fight. And it's a technique. It's a skill. So if someone fires a shot and I'm not in range, because I've manipulated the angles, I've manipulated the distance somehow, I've manipulated my silhouette, any number of things that make me seem more or less in range. If I let him miss, he knows something. If I block that shot that I didn't have to block, he believes something that isn't accurate. And by managing their perceptions, they go, oh, all right, so I am in range. That was valid. It was never valid, but I let him think it was valid. I let him believe something is happening that isn't actually happening. And managing and feeding back false information is huge for this.
Ronvalder loves that one.
Yeah,
but I find it's massively valuable for that. And one of the things I'm always telling new fighters and old fighters, and it's the same advice I give to dukes and newbies, is play it a little bit like a video game. Push the A button and see what happens. And if they don't do anything, it means you can do something that they won't respond to. And if they do something, it gives you something you can use against them. No matter what they do, they give you information to use against them. Everything is a piece of information they feed you, saying, this is how I would like to die. Please kill me this way.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah, I think you're nailing it. I'm going to throw Ronvalder on because he's all there nodding and happy and smiling because you said all this stuff, the place where he lives. So Ronvalder.
Yeah, one agree? Of my we have a knight who's now a count, who I'm bragging. He was my squire, but he used to, when he was a squire, he referred to me as he'd say, my knight is one of the best liars in the kingdom. And what he meant by that was the false information that I would give in a fight. Figuring out how to read your opponent and make them give you information is a vital skill to use in a fight, and takes a lot of practice and a lot of learning to do. And it's only half. The other half is, what information are you giving? Be aware of what it is you're giving to your opponent all the time. I was here just nodding a lot because Michael's just like right on top of everything that I was thinking. The anxiety that we talked about early, creating that in your opponent. That anxiety is fear of unknown. I don't know what my opponent's going to do. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. And feeding that anxiety in an opponent is a great tool to use. We talked about some specifics. We talked about Al-Anon did the thing with the thrusting tip. I don't like to do that myself. I don't have a problem with people, but I don't like doing it. But I realize I have my own similar version of that. Most everybody who's fought me knows I take time to figure out an opponent, whatever amount of time that is. But it's not uncommon for me in the beginning of a fight to just relax and then suddenly drop my thrusting tip right between their shield and sword and drop my hip down like I'm going to stab them. It's the same thing Alan's doing. I'm making a sudden motion that says, I'm ready to stab you. And they realize, oh my God, he could have killed me right there. Reality is I couldn't, because like Michael said, I was never in range. I wanted them to feel like I was closer than I was. So now their mind is suddenly going, oh my God, I'm behind in this fight. He's already figured things out. He's already doing things. And sometimes it's just being done because I want you thinking, oh my God, I don't know what he's doing. And, you know, it's exactly what Michael said. I'm controlling that, controlling the mind on that. We talked earlier about concentration, and I think we've interchangeably used the words concentration and focus. I think that's fine. I prefer to think of it as focus. Concentration to me personally just feels like something you got to work at, and focus is just bringing everything down to one thing. I remember early on people talking about how exciting fighting was for them, and my peers at the time when I was unbelted, and the perplexed look I got from them when I told them fighting's not exciting for me. It's not exciting. Excitement comes when you don't know what can happen. You suddenly get a thing, right? It's, oh, a thing happened. That's exciting. I don't want any of that in my fight. My fights should be calm and meditative. Meditation is basically bringing your mind's focus down to one point. You know, that's really what it is. And that's what fighting is for me. Everything comes down to this moment and all these skills to do this one thing. That's all I'm trying to do. So it's very calm. It doesn't have emotion. My fights are not exciting for me. They shouldn't be. So yeah, that's my piece on that. Oh, another one. I made a note. I've been making notes, you guys, because you guys create thoughts in me. Al-Anon mentioned coming out with confidence. He's exactly right. Coming out with confidence is what Bronis was talking about, making the small blocks. I've seen him do it before where somebody will unleash on him and you move just enough to get the block. And you practice that, right? You practice when somebody throws and you block just enough to get it. But if you stay calm and do a small block, no matter what tension you might have inside you, it gives the opponent the impression no matter how hard he tries, it doesn't really mean anything to you. But there's something different between confident and cocky. Yes. If you come out cocky, we will read that as fear. When a person comes out and they are cocky with me, I know they're afraid of me. And the more cocky they get, the more comfortable I begin to feel. So yeah, that's
it's a weird line, Braunwalder, though, because I mean, what appears cocky to some people is confidence in other people. And, you know, I always think of like Anderson Spider Silva, whose MMA fighting, it's a very showy in a way, but I think he's also trying to do some of the performance art aspect of it to get in his opponent's head. But you can't ever say that there was I don't think what he's doing comes from a fear spot, but I know exactly what you're talking about with because we see it with fighters all the time, the false confidence, and you're like, oh, thanks for showing me that, because I know I can work with your false confidence. Your regular real confidence, that's a hard thing for anyone to deal with, because that just means a person's going to be calm, collected, ready to do the work, ready to put the work in to win that fight against you. But yes, when we see the false confidence, but I mean, I still think of all the neat little things that, Anderson Silva does where, and I do this. So what Branos does with a block, I like to do with a shock. I mean, I love making someone miss with my head, because that just is demoralizing. And I know that I've demoralized them. It's like, we think of ourselves, well, you shouldn't be getting out of shots by moving your head. So when you see someone do that, it's not like I want to pull that on everyone, but if I'm in a tough place and I don't know where else to go, maybe I'll do this sort of false, well, I got whatever you got, and I can just move my head out of the way. And again, I love the little blocks. I love just getting out of someone's, matadoring someone, and then acting like it was no sweat whatsoever.
Yeah. All right. And I think, Ronvaldo, you're 100% right. I think it depends on the person. Some people come out there and they want to play that game. And as long as you are not in the game, you're perfectly fine. If in fact you look at it as like, if that's the way you think you need to play those games on me to win, I'm already winning. And I think that's the way he looks at it. That's De Silva can go out there and play all those games he wants. Some guy on the other side that's like, fuck you, I'm just going to put you on the mat. I'm not even listening to you. He's thinking, you could play that game. It's one less game you got.
Right.
So Muhammad Ali, I mean, the prime example of this is Muhammad Ali against George Foreman in Africa had a witch doctor put a curse on or whatever on Foreman, and everybody thought it was a joke. But the problem is it changed Foreman's thoughts a little bit, and Foreman let it get to him a little bit. And it's those kinds of games that people play. We play them even when we're sitting around talking to each other sometimes, because we know, me and Alan, I know we're going to fight each other at some point or something, and it may be play, but it's still talk that we have to think about. What I'd like to do. Oh, you know what? And Michael, go ahead and just do the difference between confidence and arrogance, because I think that goes into the ego piece that you wanted to bring up earlier too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So everybody talks about confidence and arrogance and cockiness, and there's a very easily identifiable difference between them. Confidence is faith in me. I have faith in my abilities. I know where I stand. I know what I'm capable of. I know this is what I can and will do. I have confidence in that. This is my ability. Arrogance is, I feel my ability is better than yours. Arrogance gets you killed. Arrogance is a comparative value, which is super hard to be accurate, because maybe you are better, maybe you're not. But arrogance leads to mistakes. Arrogance leads for you to not take someone seriously, to assume you don't have to work as hard, you don't have to fight as cleanly, to fight as well. But confidence just improves your ability. If you have faith in something, you have an honest knowledge that this is where I'm at, this is what I'm capable of, and I will stay within my bounds, and I will fight my best fight within what I know to be my abilities. That's confidence, and that's brilliant. Arrogance is just a path to getting killed.
Yes, I care about what I think about me. I don't care what you think about me. You had a video, Bronis, you wanted to show?
Yeah, I'm going to just run through this video a little bit. Let me hide that. And we'll see if I can get it right this time. Alan on said, make it giant. Oop, there we go. I'm going to set it back a little bit. So this is a heroic battle with Duke Kenrick, no longer with us. Wonderful man. They're both left-handed, but this gives you an example. Let's see if it feeds right onto the other thing. But this gives you an example. There's those misses that we're talking about.
It's doing right, Bronis. Just go over on the video itself and click full screen on the video.
Oh, okay.
Right there, yes.
Ah, gotcha. Now I'm going to start it back up again. There we are. So here we are. Rumgolder made a miss a couple times, and you notice he had a fake in there. He knew exactly what was going to happen to slide underneath that sword. I'm going to just roll it back a little bit here. Let's go back a couple of seconds. All right, here we go. He makes a miss. See how he's constantly pushing him a little bit here. He's setting up, putting a little pressure, makes a miss. Now this is deep into the fight. We're 2.5 minutes into the fight already. Rumgolder's already been setting up a lot of tension and control work to build to one shot at the end here. There's a little wiggle of the sword. There it is. Everybody, it's interesting because this is kind of the something that so many people I know talk about, that exact shot. And there was oohs and ahs in the audience when that shot was done. And I think the big point there is there's a game that was set up, right? There's that place we talked about that, how we built something with the mind and created a shot. You didn't see a lot of heroic physical performance there. You saw a lot of testing and setup. And Rumgolder put him in a place he knew he was going to throw high or block high, slipped under him, and made a beautiful strike. That's what we're talking about in this episode. We went from what you need to do mentally, how you practice, and positive attitude. Sometimes positive attitude has to be built. The coach needs to help build that. You need to help people with anxiety and turn it from a losing thing to a positive thing, and build those pieces to allow a person to get to those good positive places where they can be, they don't bring emotion into the fight anymore, where they can find that freedom of mind, where they can let ideas slip through their minds and things like that a lot faster, so they can process a lot faster. That's where we all got. That's the reason why so many people here and all of these, I look at this and it's a great conversation, because I just love being around these people. And I get to learn a ton. So, but the idea here is that we're trying to help you understand those things. And it's, we're not maybe all of the ideas of here's all the sneaky stuff. Well, guess what? There is no sneaky stuff. It's just like a physical thing. You have to develop it, the mental thing as well. And in that fight, that was Rongvaller developing, and he's fought in many heroics. And that was Rongvaller taking all of that stuff, including probably anxiety. You're standing in front in a heroics battle, haven't lost one yet. Well, there's a lot of pressure there. And it's, and he's using that anxiety as a positive. I'm going to test. I'm going to make sure I don't fall off right at the beginning of the fight. I'm going to make sure everything I do is perfect. And then I'm going to read faster, and I'm going to do all of those things. He's using that anxiety. So we talked about all these things to get to that point where that was the 90% mental fight. And that's where, it's not, we're not going to tell you something that you're going to be able to just go do. You have to practice, and you have to build those things. So we're at the top of 9:30. I already told people that we'd probably be running a little bit late, and because one piece that we always seem to miss out on is the rest piece. And it's an interesting piece. I'm in a book right now, Peak Performance, that talks a lot about the rest piece. And they have, they talk about, the book is written by a high-end accountant person and somebody that the youngest, fastest runner in the US at one point. Both of them ended up, one lost his job, or didn't lose. He walked away from his job working really close with the president of the United States. And the other one never performed again after his best race. And some of that comes from the constant pushing for more and more stress. Because Al-Anon said something earlier tonight. He's addicted to that stress and that pressure of winning. Well, and that's actually out of another book. That's out of Relentless, another book I brought up again tonight. Almost every one of us are addicted to it, and that's why we keep searching for it. And that's why we keep working hard. We could give up anytime. Hey, made it to the top of the game. I'm a Duke. I quit. That's easy. What? Everybody's good with me being a Duke? That's bullshit. We don't care. In fact, oftentimes that belt, the hats, those are just things on the way to where we're trying to go, right? We're addicted to pushing ourselves. But if you keep pushing yourself to a point, you will absolutely burn out. Not only will you burn out, but you may actually slow your development. And like I said, in Peak Performance, they have a number of conversations in that book, both physically. We work out really hard. We break down muscle. We sleep at night, and our muscle builds. If we just keep working out, we never allow our muscle to build. It will not build. You have to have rest. Your mental game is exactly the same way. Josh Waits, who's done a lot of stuff, but in chess, great part of his book talks about, and he talks again in Peak Performance, great part of his book talks about how he went to a sports camp and he learned how to rest his mind just by doing sports activities. And the coach would help him understand how to create rest mentally. And then he went back because he realized that he probably was affected by this for years. And he went back and looked at all his logs, and he could see that late after 4 or 5 hour game, that's where his game broke down. So then what he did is he would get up out of games and take a 30-minute break. He'd go outside, run a little bit. He'd lay on the lawn. He would sit, meditate, and then he would go back in, and he could keep playing. He gave his mind a time to rest. So there's a lot of great stuff about how we get there and all the stress we put on ourselves and why we put that stress on ourselves and all of that. But rest, they say, is probably even more important. They talk about they took some great athletes out of college, and they asked them all, they tested them all on their skills. And there are 2 different sports they were doing. And then they asked them to sleep an hour and a half longer a day. So they gave them, they kind of said, okay, I want you to sleep an hour and a half longer. They did. Every one of them came back better after a number of weeks than they were prior, because they had more rest. And I forget his name, the first person to run the 4-minute mile. People were shocked. He ran a lot of 401s. Nobody broke a 4-minute mile yet. They thought physically it was impossible. Right before he ran the 4-minute mile, he went out and hiked and camped with his friends. Everyone's like, what the hell are you doing? You train every day. What are you doing? He went and did that for a couple weeks. And then came home. He didn't do nothing. Light warm-ups. And then he ran a sub 4-minute mile, because he found that place not only to physically rest, but mentally rest, because he needed to let all of that pressure go and then just let himself perform. And that's important in a fight as well. And, in a fight where Ron Girl is talking about, we overload you. And Michael's like, just find those times where you can relax, right? That's what you're doing. You're letting all of that go. You're giving yourself, even if it's a couple second break, you're allowing all of that to flow out of you before you re-engage and start stressing yourself to push yourself again. Super important. So just be aware that the rest is a really big part of the mental game as well. Anyone on that? How do you guys get to those places to rest? Anyone? Yeah, we don't think about resting much. It was interesting.
I might not be good at it, so I think it's something I need to work on.
So
I know
Google,
personally.
Can I know personally? Go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm gonna. The book I'm reading, Google actually does a 1-minute exercise of essentially, let's see, it's mindfulness training, and what they had a person that was. That did that all the time, and high end, working 60 hours a week, but he would sit and do meditation for a very short period of time, just concentrating on his breath. And then he started offering it to other employees, and Google soon realized that it was helping everybody be more creative. Where do you think about the best ideas? In the shower? Driving in your car somewhere? You don't think about them when your mind is actively thinking about them. You think about them when your mind is at rest, are in its neutral place. And that's where great artists get those things. And now that mindful rest or meditation went out of Google and it's used all over the place. So go ahead, Al-Anon. I apologize.
No,
I just wanted to say that.
Actually, that's important, because I think what I'm trying to say is that's probably an area where I need help.
Me too.
Because if I'm not physically exhausted and or mentally exhausted, when I lay down to go to bed, I can't stop fighting in my head.
Bingo.
And I know that I've got to let it go, because it's not like I'm coming up with something that's going to be helpful. I'm just fighting old losses. I'm fighting, how do I want to do things differently? I'm mentally cataloging all the areas of opportunity that I have. And the thing is I rarely ever go, Eureka, I'm onto something, and that's something I'll work on in the coming days. Instead, it's a place where I'm poorly managing my anxieties. So I look forward to looking up your sources on that and delving into that a little bit, because I know that I would be a healthier person if I could let things go and just go to sleep.
And actually, it's interesting because they talk about this in the book. If you get a chance, I'll post up maybe a link to it. But if you get a chance, read the book, because they dive into actual exercises and other things. They talk a lot about blue light in right before going to bed, actually. And that comes from your phones, from your TVs, all of those things. Blue light will actually change the mental feeling where you are, like time zone wise. In other words, you'll feel like if you're sitting watching, that blue light coming off of something will set you back hours or from what your normal sleep schedule is. So they talk about that a lot. There's all kinds of things in the book that around that whole mental performance and rest, because they find it was so important.
Awesome.
So concerning rest, and I think we think about it as something that, like, you need to pursue at this point or that point, or we need to, do that at night. I don't think it's just that. I've found a huge amount of success in just doing it throughout the day.
Yeah.
I mean, and I work in a field where I work in a correctional field where an incident may happen at any moment. Like, stuff may happen. I work with youth who are mentally unstable, who are violent, who are aggressive, and you have to have yourself turned on because stuff can happen. But even in those situations, there are times when you can just be observing a room full of people that are potentially threats in the wrong circumstances and just notice what you notice. And it lets your mind rest while you're still observing everything that's happening. Or when you're driving, you could be thinking about all the things you need to do, all of the, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? What do I have to do? I have this other thing. I have to go shopping. I have to, whatever, have a job thing. All those things don't have to happen right then. If you're not solving those problems, just let yourself drive. Just notice what you notice and get your rest there. Get your rest as you're doing all these other things intermittently throughout the whole day. You don't have to say, and even though I meditate every day. I meditate every day. I actively pursue multiple meditations and have for decades. And I think that's hugely valuable. But I think it's every bit as valuable the 10-second meditations I do, and the 5 seconds here, and the 20 seconds there, and the 1 minute here, and a breathing exercise I like to do when I'm driving.
Yep.
And all of that just lets you get rest and lets your mind kind of be trained to be quickly and easily in a nice state that you want it to be, just a little bit at a time. It's kind of like the difference between traditional exercise and the way the Spetsnaz do it. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but the Spetsnaz have this weird training where they'll do like 5 push-ups and then stop. And 3 hours later, they'll do 10 more. And then 3 hours later, they'll do another 6. And then they'll do 15. But they're never exhausted. They just do a little bit here and a little bit there, but their fitness gets built up. And our mental fitness is the same way. You could just spend 30 seconds here and a minute there.
I agree.
It works brilliantly.
Okay. I'm going to drop something for Tristan and then you, Rongalder, okay? And then we are 15 minutes long, so let's try to wrap it up real quick and let people.
Yeah, in fact, the comment that I had would fit well as a kind of a final thought wrap up, and that is you can look at learning fighting really, or anything, in 3 layers. There's the physical layer, and that's fairly straightforward to learn, and it's fairly straightforward to teach and communicate. Then there's the second layer is the mental, and then the third is the spiritual. And that's when your activity gets so deep that you've gone beyond the conscious thought part. It's become you. And that's a very deep place to get. But the point I wanted to make here is that when we coach somebody or teach them about, how to use hip rotation to do a shot, or how to do the physical thing, we can show you, we can illustrate, we can be an example and say, here's how you physically move. You can see it, you can try to copy it. You won't get exactly there by watching somebody give an example, but you can get darn close by studying it. The problem with the mental is you can't show an example to somebody. It's very, very hard to convey, okay, here's how I think, or here's how you can try to think yourself. And the other problem is people think differently. Different mental methods people will get different results from. What works for Ron Walder does not work for me. Exactly. And I'm probably everybody on this and everybody listening, it's going to be a little different for you. The physical is the same way. Your body is a little physically different than the person teaching you or the person you're trying to learn from. There's variations, but realize each of those is like its own language. Like it has its own vocabulary, it has its own grammar. Learning the physical is learning one language. And then when you switch to the mental, now you have to learn a whole new language. So just be ready to kind of get into a new endeavor that's going to be challenging. And it's going to be more challenging because you can't just outright copy what somebody else is doing to find success like you can with the physical. So I found that for myself to be a good framing of how the mental and the physical go as you start learning, and never think you can say, oh, the physical is not that important, I'm just going to jump right to the mental. You can't you can't bypass learning the physical. It has to be there. But I've also found too that in going to the mental, you can't be so obsessed with the physical that your mind is taken up by auditing what you're doing physically. You have to kind of let go of the physical and trust that your body's been trained correctly to move without you having to consciously think about it. Then you can start learning the new language of the mental, if that makes sense.
Nope, totally makes sense. Rongvalder, you had the last one, and then I'll wrap her up.
Okay. Actually, that makes perfect sense, because that's the frustration I've been dealing with. Like when I was talking before about changing where my weight and where my feet are, I've gone, if I may be so bold, I've gone so far as to go into that spiritual, and now I have to go backwards and use the mental to figure out a physical. So I've had to let go of sort of the mental and go backwards, so I can get the physical and come back up again. The thing I wanted to mention is we talk about all this rest with the mind, and it's a little frustrating to hear, because I was thinking at first, I'm not sure I do that enough. And I think, like Al-Anon, I think I need to be more conscious of, am I doing it and what I should be doing. Something I wanted to point out to people, though, is understand that resting your mind doesn't mean your mind shuts off. And as a matter of fact, your mind, because we can now actually measure, right, how much energy the mind is putting out. And what they have found is, as you fatigue, what your body does is it shifts that energy to different parts of your brain for different purposes, right? So the example is, you go in a grocery store, you make all these decisions about what you need, what you're going to do for the rest of the week, what you're going to eat. Are you going someplace? You need to bring food and water for that. There's this section with the clothes I'm going to pick up. You make all these decisions, for an hour or 2 hours. Then you get to the register, and there's these candy bars, and you're like, oh, that looks awesome. And you just get one. The reason they tempt you so much there is because your brain has put all this energy into the part of your brain for making decisions. It is now fatigued, so it shifts that energy to the part of your brain for seeking food, basically. It's like, look, we ran out of energy, so now we're going to put our energy into finding food. The point is, the amount of energy between the two is the same. Your brain never stops working at the same amount of energy output, but it will change where it puts it depending on what it needs. So if you work really hard on a thing and you need to rest your mind, like we're talking about here, I'm going to say like everybody else is talking about, because you guys have said better things about it than I have. What you need to do is do something else. That's what everybody here is talking about. You'll notice they mentioned doing groups going off to do push-ups. One guy does a thing, and he goes out and then he takes a walk or lays on the lawn. You know, they're not shutting their minds down. They can't. You can't. It's impossible. But you can do something else. And that's what actual resting is. You change where your brain puts the energy.
Yep, I totally agree. And the best part on peak performance, and a little bit here on this is the Audible version, but we'll post some links to the book. They go into a lot of talk about different things, including the 1 minute mindfulness meditation and gray matter growth and everything else. It's been just a wonderful book to dig into. But meanwhile, I hope everybody had a great show. I have only one question to Michael, because he brought it up, and I want to know where this one goes. You brought up something called Eurocycles.
That's actually Go Cycle. It's
Go Cycles.
Go. It's a Chinese weird spelling for it. But
okay. Go Cycles
is the spelling, but they're called Go Cycles, and it's a form of mental conditioning where you disregard all negative results. Because we tend to cycle. We say, all right, so something bad happens, and then I feel bad about something. It makes me more likely for it to happen again. You kind of get in negative spirals. People are really commonly falling into that. We all do that. But a Go Cycle, you literally disregard everything else, but whenever you have something positive happen, you tell yourself, yes, that thing.
Yes.
And you focus on that. And then when the next thing happens, if it's 10 seconds later or a minute later, you're like, yes, another thing. And you cycle another positive thing, another positive thing, another positive thing. And whatever you focus on, you just seem to get more of. And by creating a what's called a go cycle, you create a chemical reaction in your body that's similar to adrenaline, but is long lasting and maintainable.
Okay. So that's interesting because that falls right into our behavior episode we had. Because the only way to change behavior, good or bad, is through positive reinforcement, and that's actually practicing it. So thank you. That's a great one. I wanted to know. So, we took a little longer, and I kind of knew we were gonna, and I actually didn't want to stop. And I thank all the coaches here because I find this super interesting. We had a lot of great comments out there by a number of people that were very good as well. But I'd like to thank everybody for staying extra long. We have next week episode coming up is going to be what you need to know about injuries. And that's a big one. We've talked about this before, but I don't think we can actually talk about it enough. And because we all get them, and how we deal with them is really critical to continuing the game, or maybe even sometimes making your game better. So hopefully next week we'll have a great episode, and everybody will get a chance to think about that one a little bit deeper, and make sure that we're going down the right path when we are in those places. Michael, Your Grace, I'd like to thank you for coming out. It's always a pleasure to have you here. Rongvalder, awesome to have you back. Thanks for joining us today. And Tristan, it's nice to have you back. I know you've been a busy guy for the last couple of weeks. So thanks. But the best thanks goes out to everybody who was out online listening, watching, and talking, because without all those good people out there watching us, maybe we're talking into the ether about nothing. But I'm hoping we're helping the people out there, because like somebody said earlier in the show, that's our fun. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll see you next week. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone.